The United States has delayed the start of sweeping new tariffs on a range of Chinese imports by at least 2 weeks. Higher tariffs were set to go into effect on Thursday. Now they are under further review. More tariffs may be put on Chinese-made EVs, lithium-ion batteries, semiconductors, and a lot more. The office is expecting a final determination to be made later in August. The new tariffs could cover some $18 billion worth of Chinese imported goods. Now, for more insight into the state of trade relations between China and the United States, we're joined by Dan McClory. He's a managing director and head of China for Boustead Securities. Dan, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
Now, it's a very short move, just across the river from Virginia into Washington, D.C., but how significant is this move for the CCPIT?
Well, I think it shows clearness of intent. It shows the desire to attempt to transform the strategic competitors into perhaps strategic partners at some point in time. So, actions speak louder than words. So I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, and I think if anything else, it always keeps that discussion going. And we have talked a lot about how discussions are going between the two nations, a lot on the very high levels. But let's talk about the significance of what we saw recently. The Council for Trade and Promotion spending time in Maryland, forging ties with a state that has a solid record of trade with China and getting to do things like go to a baseball game, have crabs. How important is it to have that, to use the term, people-to-people exchange, where they sit down and they can talk very informally?
Yeah, I always say that deals are people, okay? Deals are people, so relationships endure. So to the extent that relationships can be improved, perhaps forged, it's always something positive. But I think for the most part, there's somewhat of a waiting game through the election to see how things are going to settle. Should people sit on their hands and do nothing in the meantime? Absolutely not. So hats off for taking some form of constructive action.
Yeah, and in sticking with Maryland, one promising aspect, of course, is its massive port and the ability to ship cars and other goods in and out. Now, of course, there was that tragic bridge collapse and it blocked things for a few months, but it's been reopened for nearly 2 months. And one would think just sitting down face to face, again, it's definitely going to help to smooth out any kind of concerns, any kind of misconceptions. I hate to hammer away about that, but it is very important, as you talked about. It does come down to people.
As you and I both know, Sean, we want to do business with people we like. If we don't like people, we can choose not to do business. So to the extent that this is a step in that direction to know and to like people, it's positive.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you did allude to what's going to happen in the United States in November, the election. But there is, of course, the business of sanctions. Donald Trump has made it clear he wants even more punishing sanctions, 100% at some cases. Now, is there any reason to believe that Kamala Harris would change the status quo under the Biden administration? What is China looking at right now? What is their pitch to U.S. trade representatives?
So Harris, I mean, you have to go back to 2020 when she herself was a candidate. She was kind of tariff averse, right? She was not an inherently tariff-oriented person. But I think you will see Harris with the status quo of the Biden administration, which was largely the status quo of the former Trump administration. Of course, the new Trump administration is likely going to be something altogether different. So I think she would be more continuity on the Biden policies and not doubling down like Trump intends to do.
So what do Chinese delegates tell people in the U.S.? The people that they're talking with about trade issues. One would think they have to say, well, who really suffers from these punishing sanctions? It's not just one country.
Sure. I mean, there is a lot of interconnectedness between the nations. And when you talk about trade, it's not just one way, right? It's bidirectional, okay? And not only is it bidirectional, but there are a lot of U.S. companies who have set up in China because there are, the largest amount of highest socioeconomic level consumers in the world there. So it's a market that most developed countries do not want to miss out on. So we want to talk about all these barriers and potential tariffs about things coming into the U.S. Because again, with Trump, he's talked about 20% on Japan, 10% on the EU, 60% on China is the headline number that he's thrown out there. But let's remember that it goes in both ways. We sell a lot of stuff to China. Uh, China sells a lot of stuff to us.
Yeah, and China has also made it very clear it wants to open up more, saying manufacturing is going to open up completely, telecom, healthcare, things like that. So talk more about the areas of dispute between the two countries, and by perhaps putting the welcoming mat out to a degree. I know there are still concerns. How is this going to be positive down the road?
Well, I mean, first of all, we know, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but one of the positive effects of tariffs may be to spur U.S. investment into China to sell into that market, right? It's a massive market and it's taking place. Again, that's sort of an indirect side effect. But I think the areas which are protectionist in nature that we just got done referencing, 100% on EVs, right? That's 100. That's a big number. 50% on semiconductors. Uh, in one case, that's 5 times the original tariff. In another case, it's twice the original tariff. And personal protective equipment, that's 25%. That'd be a new tariff altogether that would be thrown out there. So what's that going to do? It's probably going to cause some continued, if not offshoring, but conduit manufacturing. So Chinese manufacturers may be setting up in Mexico and things coming into the U.S. inherently with a Chinese imprint on them, but they come in through Mexico, for example. Some of the outsourcing of the supply chain in other parts of the world that we saw in reaction to COVID and all the disruption that occurred there, that may be intensified if tariffs heat up against China as a backdoor or a way around or a way to continue having this flow of goods without massive tariffs coming into effect.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few months, and it's not far out of the realm to say the whole global economy is watching to see what's going to unfold. Dan McClory, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you, Sean.